Good evening. Today is April 2nd, 2022. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to America in Danger and the 72nd week of the woke globalist insurrection in this country.
Yeah, about the 75th year of the infiltration of these people. So,
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we've talked about Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, and we showed videos, and that's a very broad and deep subject there.
Right.
Because there's so much going on there that most people don't understand. When you say World Economic Forum, most people are going to think, oh, that's a bunch of economists and really smart people who get together and talk about the world economy
and probably tune it out like, oh, C-SPAN,
Exactly. Exactly. So most people think, oh, well, it's no big deal.
Right.
It's like they used to say about the Council on Foreign Relations. Oh, well, they're just smart people who get together and talk about these things.
Discuss things and have a magazine and, yeah.
Well, the World Economic Forum is, in essence, created to change the course of history.
Right.
To change the course of civilization, of people, of the world, of nations.
Sort of a realignment, for lack of a better term.
A realignment. That's a good point. It is. In fact, Klaus Schwab, who founded the World Economic Forum and controls the World Economic Forum, has written a book called The Great Reset, in which he describes how nations like the United States will cease to exist, and we will be merged into globalist control, and everything will be controlled. Money will be controlled, your livelihood will be controlled, your career will be controlled. Everything will be controlled through this globalist.
All presented as a benevolent, desirable thing.
Yep. And there's another aspect of the Klaus Schwab World Economic Forum thing. It's called transhumanism. And most people have probably never even thought about transhumanism. Klaus Schwab believes that as technology continues to develop, and as it will, we know that it will, machinery, electronics, computers, what have you, will be integrated into the human body.
It's like a cybernetic kind of thing.
Like a cybernetic type thing, exactly. Now, Klaus Schwab really wants to hurry that along, but not for the betterment of society, not for the betterment of people, which is what they claim, of course.
Certainly not for the betterment of individual liberty.
Exactly. It's a detriment to individual. It destroys individual liberty, but he wants to be able to control people with electronics and manipulate people and what they do and how they feel and how they think. It's a typical sci-fi future that he believes in. Now, the really scary thing about it is that they're making it happen.
Getting some traction. Yeah.
They're getting some traction. The whole Green New Deal is part of that.
Sure it is.
Is to force us into into a box where we have no way out.
Well, first of all, I would argue in any set of circumstances where we're discussing these things that cheap energy is a way for people to act on their liberty. It makes it practical, in essence, for people to act on their liberty in an economical way. And that's because, and that's a circular thing, that's because the liberty that we've enjoyed in this country economically has produced the cheap energy.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not that those aren't independent variables.
Right. Talk about a feedback loop.
Exactly, and it's a very good positive feedback loop that has produced abundance and a high standard of living for people in this country and allowed them to have even greater personal autonomy. Private automobiles, control over how they heat and cool their homes, all those things. So the Green New Deal is absolutely paramount to this effort to control people. You gotta limit their access to cheap energy, put them in mass transit. Okay, all this sounds, these people that's crazy sinister talk. It's not. These people are actually right out in the open saying, this is what we want to do. They're trying to scare people with talk of unsustainability, and we're gonna destroy the planet in 12 years. It won't be habitable unless we do these things. Same kind of thing they did during the height of the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Well, if we don't accede to some of the world government concepts and some of the accommodations for Soviet communist thinking, we're going to have a nuclear conflagration. It's going to be the end of the world. They're always kind of got that sort of Damocles hanging over everybody's head with this stuff, and the energy thing is probably the linchpin of this Great Reset that they're trying to perpetuate.
I agree, and a major part of that, to force people into this, to force people to accept it, is what we talked about last show, and that's dehumanization, is to push people down to recognize them as somewhat less than human.
Right.
And we know through history that this has been done in numerous nations.
Well, Klaus Schwab himself has some Nazi roots, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. And that's where I was going. The Nazis treated the Jews as if they were subhuman.
Yeah.
In fact, they called them subhuman.
They did.
Subhuman individuals. And it wasn't just the Jews. There were other races that they considered subhuman as well. And they weren't number one on the list for extermination, but they were pretty high up.
That's right. That's right.
And if people think that wouldn't have come to pass, well, had Hitler gone on, then it would have. He'd have just moved from the Jews to the next category of people.
That's right. People, the undesirables. Well,
undesirables.
And recall that part of Nazi ideology was extermination of defectives, as they call them.
Yes, it was.
People with mental disabilities and physical infirmities. They pretty much wanted to weed out any of those what they considered to be weak genes out of the population, and that is no different from the goals of people like Margaret Sanger and the founders of Planned Parenthood, the eugenics movement, the eugenesis of the Woodrow Wilson period right here in the United States. So this is not something that was unique to Europe or unique to Germany. So these thoughts and ideas have been percolating for a long time, and unfortunately now technology is of a nature that it's actually giving them somewhat of a leg up on implementing their goals.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
my
it
assessment
is.
anyway.
And to kind of sum up what we're talking about here tonight, I want to run this slide, and it's a summation of the 5 stages of dehumanization. So I want to show you this, and we're gonna put this up there so that you can see the 5 stages of dehumanization, because it's good to know these things and recognize them. So Lee, if you'll switch over to the HDMI for me, please. All right, the 5 stages of dehumanization. The first stage is to create and politicize fear and anxiety, and we've certainly seen plenty of that.
Yes.
The second stage is soft exclusion, and that's to categorize people so that they can be excluded from certain activities or certain considerations. And we also saw that in the recent
well, that was a huge
pandemic.
That was a huge feature of the pandemic.
No mask,
culture.
You can't come in.
Right.
No vaccine passport.
That's right.
You can't come in.
That's right.
The third stage is to justify those exclusions. We saw that as well. I mean, we have firsthand experiential evidence of these things. The fourth aspect is hard exclusions. That's when your cards are turned off, your accounts are turned off, your electricity's turned off. You can't buy things.
And there's been some of that.
There absolutely has. And the 5th stage of dehumanization is extermination.
Right.
Now, we know we are not at the extermination phase yet.
Right. I'd say we're somewhere heavily, on the cusp before. Hard, and ready to enter that in full-throated form and fashion.
I think so. But these are the things that Klaus Schwab preaches.
Yeah.
Through the World Economic Forum.
Well, he fully endorses the Chinese social credit system, for example, which is a horribly oppressive, authoritarian mechanism by which you literally are given demerits, societal demerits in a computerized system for behaviors that they deem unacceptable. And it could range from spitting on the sidewalk to expressing political views they don't like, but the ultimate consequence is that you don't have as much access to your money, or you're not given, you're not able to get loans, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they want. They want to put us, basically turn us all on a bunch of rats in a maze.
Yeah, exactly. Now, since we're talking about these things, I do have videos. And I want to show you this video because we've shown these on the show before, with the exception of one of them tonight. But we've shown these. But you need to see them because we're not the only ones pointing this out.
Well, that's right. And I'm sure there are those out there who say, well, those guys, they read some articles and they've misconstrued some things.
Right, or listen to Alex Jones.
Right, and they've ginned all this stuff up and they're out there spouting all this stuff. It's just nonsense, it's crazy, none of this is ever going to happen. Well, maybe, but I don't think so.
Well,
not based on things I've seen and observed.
I think it's happening right now.
That's right.
And, Klaus Schwab with his World Economic Forum is not only, it's the age-old tactic. It's the age-old communist tactic. You don't win in direct battle.
Right.
You infiltrate, you demoralize, you put people in key positions who bring in more people to support them, and pretty soon you have corporations that you don't even recognize anymore, like maybe Disney.
Like maybe Disney.
Like maybe Disney. But watch this video. This is Klaus Schwab, and he is literally bragging about putting World Economic Forum agents into governments around the world. So watch this video. Lee, if you'll run that video 1 for me.
And I have to say, when I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now. I mean, with the president, who is a young global leader, but
All right, well, you see Klaus Schwab absolutely admits that he has infiltrated the cabinets and the governments of Canada, we know. And if you listen to other talks that he gives, we know that it's in more than Canada.
Oh, absolutely. And he was referring to Vladimir Putin as one of the young, dynamic leaders who were part and parcel of this effort.
Absolutely.
Which I think is interesting given current events.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what was really noteworthy about that speech was the backdrop of where he was speaking. Kennedy School of Government.
So you see these schools of government and these Ivy League schools and what have you.
They're kind of down with all this, to use the common parlance.
They absolutely are. They cater to these people because they receive huge grants from these people. The World Economic Forum is fat with cash.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they dole this stuff out, and these people are on the hook. You know, once you accept that money from them, you're on the hook.
Yeah.
You are beholden to them from then on. You know, Joe Rogan had a guest on, and I think that this is a very interesting one as well, because this gentleman goes into more detail than we are, and of course I don't have the whole clip because it's too long. But Lee, if you'll run that video too, this is more about Klaus Schwab, and listen to what Joe Rogan says. Listen to the comment that he makes about the Great Reset. So take a look at this. We'll be back right after this. Lee?
Teams are now embedded in governments around the world. That's actually what they wrote.
Yes.
And the video is 2 minutes. I didn't play all of it. It's what he says.
But what he's saying there sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Figuring out on strategic ways to end the lockdown easily.
No,
that makes sense?
Not the end of the lockdown. No.
Well, didn't he say that?
Yeah. Keep in mind, Tony Blair is the one who's been advocating for vaccine passports, digital identification through COVID, and all of these measures.
But didn't they say that about ending the lockdowns and keeping businesses?
Once those measures are in place. right? So he's even in the UK, his stance has been, yeah, we're going to get out of all it, but you have to have digital ID and you have to have.
So
during
and
the war,
this is going to introduce the social credit score system.
right? So what all of that came from your question, which is, regardless of intention, how do people do that infiltration from within? It's not just Twitter. So back to the psychological operations. It's also embedding people in government who are subscribed to this agenda. Yeah. And the agenda of Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum is the same as the agenda of Tony Blair in this regard. They call it on their own website, they call it the Great Reset. That's what they say themselves.
Yeah, that's a bizarre thing to do, to openly. Why do you think they openly discuss it that way? And openly, because the Great Reset has always been this gigantic conspiracy theory among the online folks. Like, this is all part of the Great Reset. Well, when he wrote a book called The Great Reset, you're like, hey, man, shouldn't you be hiding this?
And in 2017 at Harvard, he's saying, we're going to basically, all of these world leaders will penetrate their cabinets with our young global leaders. He's open about this. He's open. Blair's open. During the Iraq War, Blair tried to bring in ID cards in Britain. He failed. Now he's back, and he's trying to bring in digital ID during COVID. Right, so they're open about it.
So this is going to be this never-ending process to slowly move the goalposts
towards more and more authoritarianism, checkpoint society. It's all there. They told us this.
People have to realize this, right? This is important.
Yeah.
Majid Nawaz has looked into this extensively, and it's very interesting the information that he puts out on this. This is a far greater problem than what we can communicate here on this show.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
These individuals are looking at the Great Reset, the 2030 plan, and what have you, and these individuals also push the Green New Deal. They push all of these climate initiatives that are destroying our ability to compete on a global scale.
Yep. Well, I think actually what they want to do is create a set of conditions where we're begging for the Great Reset. They're going to make it so that life is very, very difficult, okay, and we then become receptive to what will be characterized or cast as remediation, okay, for these problems that they have created. And I think a large aspect of the Biden administration is they are laying the groundwork for a lot of this stuff. They are purposely doing things, and none of their policies make any sense unless viewed through the lens of this kind of objective as clearly exposited by people like Klaus Schwab. And of course, I see Joe Rogan there getting a little bit red-pilled, which is nice. Well,
the look on Rogan's face was priceless.
Right.
And
the question you have to ask yourself is, I mean, Klaus Schwab, I've done a little reading, He's not omniscient or omnipotent, rather. He's not all-powerful, so he's doing this with the cooperation and assistance of lots and lots of other entities. Largely, there's the billionaire class, the Bill Gates crowd, some of these foundations, many entities in the United States. No doubt, I'm sure people like the Council on Foreign Relations, which you referenced before. I'm sure they're full foursquare behind a lot of this. This is all part of. This is a sort of a new twist on something that has been in the works for many, many, many years.
Well, this is the case of the Berkshires were fond of using a saying that this is creating the poison and the antidote in the same lab.
Yeah.
Because as you said, they're going to push this nation and the world, not just this nation, but the world, until we beg for something from them.
Right.
Beg them to fix the problem.
Well, they figured out that people will frequently happily trade their liberty for security.
Yes, they will.
And like Thomas Jefferson famously said, those who will trade their liberty for security often get neither.
You got that right. Now, as you said, this is an effort not just of Klaus Schwab, but there are many, many, many lower-level individuals who are part of this.
And I think higher-level individuals who are hidden but are also part of this.
I agree with that, absolutely. And one of those individuals is Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. Now, we wonder sometimes why he doesn't do certain things in light of the open border and those kind of things. Why he doesn't just step up and say, well, Texas is no longer going to participate in this charade. We're going to do something here.
Especially given his posture in the past as this firebrand,
Yes.
constitutionalist conservative. And a lot of these guys, he's really sort of a prototype or an archetype for many of these types. They sometimes often get called rhinos, Republican in name only, or just false conservatives, or they just appear to be corrupt. And I think in many cases because they have been corrupted by these forces.
Yeah, and here's evidence of that as well. So, Lee, if you'll run the video 3 there of Greg Abbott, look at this and watch. He does the typical political thing of not answering the question. We see that with Supreme Court nominees, with nominees of all stripe in our government, and politicians of all stripes. So take a look at this video and tell me that that's not guilt you see in his eyes.
Okay.
Okay, I have one question. Okay. So, the Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum has bragged publicly about infiltrating governments and grooming political leaders. Now, he's for the Great Reset, pushing forward Agenda 2030, complete globalization. Do you denounce the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, and the Great Reset?
Listen, I'm not a globalist. I'm a Texas first and America first person.
But do you denounce Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset?
I promote Texas and America.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, man.
All right, guys. So as you can see, I just asked Texas Governor Greg Abbott if he would denounce Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, and the Great Reset. And he refused to do so. I mean, I don't understand why it's so difficult to just say, I denounce those things. Oh, I know why, because he actually has a page of himself on the World Economic Forum. I'll show you in a second here, but anyways, it doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat. They're all corrupt, okay? The only thing is Democrats are going to get us into a very
So, refused to denounce Klaus Schwab and pulled the typical political thing of just making a statement and refusing to answer. I hate that.
And really in a ham-fisted way.
Yeah.
First of all he really has to do, I mean, the way I would answer that question, even if I were he and I felt like I was sort of compromised on that, I would say, well, I'm familiar with them, and I certainly don't support anything that would compromise the autonomy or the independence of the United States. But I think some of their goals are laudable, blah, blah, blah. That's all he has to say. But instead, he just sits there like a deer in the headlights and makes a stupid statement about supporting Texas and basically some kind of MAGA comment.
Yeah.
I mean, but that does definitely demonstrate who and what he is, which we've always kind of suspected that he was, of questionable intent.
Yep, I'll tell you.
I'm glad to see that young fellow there. We're singing from he's channeling my thinking when he says they're all corrupt. Because that's certainly how I feel about it. I can tell you that.
That's right. And his point, it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican. One side just speeds it up a little bit.
That's exactly
they're
right.
all the same in the end.
That's exactly right.
And with that, we got to take a little commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a North Carolina representative who's made the news lately, and it's kind of a you decide type thing.
Yeah, well, that'll be fun to discuss.
Yep, so stay tuned for more America in Danger. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by, so come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers, everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Safe and secure. These two words are simple yet powerful. In order to feel this way, you should know that you have the tools necessary to provide safety and security for yourself and your loved ones. As with any tools, learning how to properly use them is best learned from experts who we know we can trust. Experts who have a proven track record and a commitment to serve and protect. Enroll now in Sheriff Keystone's North Carolina Concealed Handgun Carry class, taught at the CPF Training Center in Rocky Mount. Sheriff Stone utilizes a first-in-class classroom environment and indoor firing range. This ensures a training experience that is welcoming to both first-time firearm students and those with more experience. An attentive staff that takes time to teach students the legal requirements of becoming a permitted concealed carry citizen. In addition, Sheriff Clee Atkinson teaches students situational awareness, self-defense, and skills needed to avoid becoming a victim. As you know, Sheriff Stone and Sheriff Atkinson have committed their lives to serving and protecting. There is a reason Sheriff Stone and Sheriff Atkinson's class book in advance. Come learn from two of the region's most seasoned and professional public servants. Safety and security, two simple but powerful words that can be a part of who you and your family are. Call 252-813-8898. Register today.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and one of our representatives has made the news lately. That would be a very young representative, Madison Cawthorn of the 11th District. Very young individual, he's 24, 25.
25, I think. Asheville way, in that Asheville
yeah,
way?
out western part of the state. He was injured in a car accident, so he's paralyzed from the waist down. And he is somewhat of a firebrand in that he's an avid Trump supporter, very much supportive of the America First position, principles, as am I. But he made a comment, and it's hard to strain out the bits in this whole thing, because you have several factors here that play into this. One, you have the leftist media who's just ready to seize on anything anybody that's a little bit conservative or a Trump supporter says. So you got the leftist media out there, and we know how the leftist media spins the news.
Well, they just flat out lie.
They flat out lie.
At this point, they worry about the consequences later. They lie, and then later they just say, well, yeah, that turned out we were wrong about that, but that was then, this is now kind of attitude. That's really where they are, as far as I see it.
We know we have the media aspect in this. We have the establishment Republican swamp creature, Washington swamp creature element in this as well, because they don't want anyone to upset their apple cart.
Right.
They like it the way they've got it. They like the corruption of Washington.
Well, they got their own deals going.
Absolutely do. So you've got that element as well. And what transpired in this whole thing, Madison Cawthorn made some statements that he was shocked.
This is on a podcast, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was shocked that in Washington, and some of these things were taken as direct quotes, but they really weren't. They were just some comments that he made to kind of paint a picture of what he was seeing in Washington. He was talking about that there were invites to orgies, and that elected officials were snorting cocaine and doing drugs, the very things that they were publicly opposed to.
Right.
And we know this. We know these things go on.
Yeah,
There's no doubt about it.
I'll say this, and of course this just is a manifestation of my cynicism about it all, but even if it wasn't strictly true what he said, I'm not saying it wasn't, I don't really know at this point, I think it's what they call true to life, meaning it may not be literally true, but it certainly is representative of reality.
Absolutely.
And really what he said was, he specifically said that one of these individuals basically, and I'm paraphrasing, said, well, why don't you come on by? We're having sort of a sexual get-together at one of our homes. Why don't you stop on by? And his response was, wait a minute, what did you just, I think you just invited, into himself, he was saying, I think you just invited me to an orgy. Well, was he exaggerating? Did that really happen? I don't know, but you know what? I err on the side of believing it. I mean, whether or not,
as do I.
Some are saying he's walking it back, or that he said he exaggerated because Now, I will say this: if you're gonna say stuff like that, you ought to name the names.
I agree.
You can't just put that stuff out there and let it hang, and then not be willing to name the names, because ultimately you ruin your own credibility with that.
Yeah.
And I can understand why you might not want to do that, but to me, naming the names gives you insulates you a little bit.
Well, I think so.
Personally, if I were one of these people up there and I found myself in that, I'd be recording and documenting every conversation I had. If I came out with a statement like that, I'd be able to back it up. And I'd go for the throat at that point. And so I don't really know the truth of this.
Nor do I. And I have to give him, a little leeway. He's 25. So he's very young. For someone to be in that position that's that young.
I don't think he fabricated it out of whole cloth.
Nor do I.
He may have embellished, or he may have, look, we all know, or maybe we don't, but there are numerous accounts of these various politicians like Barack Obama and these others who've written these books that are supposed to be about their lives, and you find out that many of the individuals in their accounts of their personal lives are composites, and they don't really, there isn't actually an individual named X to that gets this whole paragraph or chapter in the book. Well, this is really a synthesis of, in other words, they're lying and making stuff up, or maybe not. Maybe that's a literary technique that's legitimate. I don't know. They certainly get the benefit of the doubt by the cognoscenti in this country and the people who judge all these things.
They do.
So I'm giving Madison Cawthorn a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. I think he was basically exposing a culture in Washington that we all kind of halfway suspect exists.
Yeah, well, it's a wink and a nod.
It's a wink and a nod. And I also think that it may well be a fact that what they were doing by inviting him was trying to get some dirt on him.
Well, I tend to agree with that.
Again, I'm supremely cynical about these folks. I'm sorry, but I think fundamentally they're all blackmailable.
I think
and they have to you have to be blackmailable in order to be able to function in that, to be accepted in that town. And so they got to first get you in the compromising position. Yeah. So that may be what was going on. Well, we need to get some dope on Madison. Let's invite him to one of our affairs or one of our events. Who knows?
Well,
Who knows?
Just looking at the evidence that we know about, the Arkansas State Highway Patrol was running interference for Bill Clinton to, have these illicit rendezvous.
Right.
Bill Clinton, the notorious blue dress, Monica Lewinsky in the White House, Gary Hart, if you recall, in his presidential run, ended up being exposed. We have our own Edwards here in North Carolina, John Edwards. His wife is dying of cancer, and he's carrying on with his travel aide or his publicist. I don't know who she was. She was something with the campaign. And we know that we've heard stories otherwise of the things that go on in Washington.
Well, I'll tell you. I definitely believe the drug thing.
Oh, yeah.
I believe that in spades.
Absolutely.
And are they having full-blown, Roman-style orgies and everything?
Who knows?
Who knows? But,
Who knows?
But that that concept can cover a wide array of, behavior and activity. And based on what we know about Hollywood and, the whole sort of decadent scene associated with elites in general, I kind of, gun to my head, I believe there's more truth to it than not. It's just that simple.
As do I. And I read several of the articles talking about him walking this back and saying that he lied, confessing that he lied.
Right.
Well, none of them were true.
Right.
He did not confess. He didn't say I lied. He said that the left exaggerated his comments.
Right.
Now, was he just kind of engaged in conversation and saying, you wouldn't believe some of the things that go on. Inviting you to orgies.
Right.
Snorting cocaine. I don't doubt that a bit. But I believe less these articles that were written that I looked at this morning that the headline was, he walks it back. He confessed to lying. None of them had any.
Well, I just read
there was no substance to it.
I just read a headline that said he's doubling down on his statements, but I don't know. I'm looking at the big picture, and this isn't objective, and this certainly isn't scientific or doesn't stand journalistic scrutiny.
Right.
But nothing does these days at all. Period. But my sense is there's probably an element of truth to it.
I think
certainly.
so. And that's why I said this is one of those things that you have to decide for
Correct.
yourself. But one of the things, and we're just giving our opinion on this, but one of the things that really kind of doesn't sit well with me is the fact that Tom Tillis, the minority whip, I can't think of his name. Kevin McCarthy.
Right.
And a bunch of these other rhinos have turned their back on Cawthorn, or condemned him or endorsed his opponents. So to me, when that happens, I tend to look back at what happened with Trump. And all of these rhinos, the Romneys, the Cheneys,
the Kowskis and Collins.
Exactly.
And really a lot of others, really. McConnell and
that stabbed Trump in the back rather than supported him, knowing that his policies were good
for the nation. They were good for an independent, sovereign, constitutional United States. Look, in the Congress, the House of Representatives too. I mean, Paul Ryan, all of them. He had 2 years where he got no cooperation for an agenda that, whatever you think of him or his personality or his bombastic nature, his policies were better than any I've witnessed come out of the presidential suite since I was first watching this stuff in the 1980s. So there you go. I mean, that to me, and they knew that too, but they didn't want to be a part of something that they fundamentally aren't really in favor of.
That's right. That's exactly right. And cases like this, well, you can't believe the headlines because we know that the media lies. CNN lies. CNN there for years said, the Hunter Biden laptop, that's just Russian propaganda.
I can't believe we really haven't talked about that, but that's right. And now that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal. Now they've come out and they said, it looks like it's real.
That single thing, the way they steered everybody away from that story, big tech censored that story, that probably had as much influence on the election as any. Yeah. And we was, all these nitwits saying that Trump won. Well, if you're going to say he formally won, no, because they changed the rules.
Right.
And they used, COVID as an excuse to loosen chain of custody standards for ballots. They used big tech to suppress a lot of stories, and that was one of them, and that was a big one. That Hunter Biden, they've done a little research and polling, and to the extent that you believe anything, the polling seems reasonable. Many, many people would have changed their vote or voted differently had they even known about the story or known that it was true. You had 50 retired intelligence individuals claim that it was Russian disinformation. They knew that wasn't true. Why did they still have their security clearances?
Exactly.
Okay. These are all horrible, corrupt, nasty people.
Well, I'm going to tell you, when these people leave office or leave their appointed position, why do they retain their security clearance?
So they can make money.
Exactly. It's a scam, it's a racket, and it's perpetuated by those in power.
That's right. And it's it's a big country club up there in D.C.
Yeah. Now, if I were in the military, I left the military, I'm not going to keep that security clearance.
Right.
That security clearance expires.
I've had a secret clearance at various points in my career, but it's not in perpetuity. I don't have it now because I'm not doing those activities anymore.
Exactly. So these individuals, all of these CIA agents, the intelligence agents, when they leave office, their security clearance should end.
That's correct.
Should terminate.
Sure should.
You know, they don't need it anymore. Hillary Clinton still has a security
Yeah,
clearance.
that makes no
Why?
sense. She probably should have never had one,
Why? She
frankly.
never should have had one. That's exactly right. She ran a server, a private server, to keep her emails under the radar.
In a garage.
You know, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
You really can't. You
Yeah.
can't make this stuff up. But on the subject of Madison Cawthorn, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know, but you know what? I lean toward the side believing him.
I do too.
It's just the way it is.
And if what he said strictly, you know, by you know, in detail of what his account isn't true, I think it probably is representative of the truth.
I think so.
We'll call it a composite set of circumstances, just like so many in politics have been able to get away with in writing their memoirs and everything.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about who's running the Biden White House.
It's a good question.
Just don't know. So stay tuned for more America in Danger. We'll be right back.
My name is Nicholas Bellamy with Premier Equipment of Rocky Mount. I'm going to talk about the 1635 Mahindra. The most important thing is the lift capacity is 1,700 pounds versus 1,100. The particulate filter, after 40, 50 hours on particulate filter, this tractor here will kick in a regen. When it kicks in regen, you're not supposed to have it pulled in your garage, hay barn, etc. Mahindra, you do not have to worry about any kind of particulate filter. You don't have to worry about running your RPMs up all the time. On the Mahindra tractor here, like I said, you can see how well built the rear end, and it's very heavy cast iron metal. On the competitor over here, you can see it's aluminum. No telescopic lift arms.
Come on down here today. We want a chance to earn your business.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we are back, and as I said before the break, who's driving the ship here?
Well, if you're talking about the Biden administration.
I am.
I prefer simpler questions, so I'd like to at least start by answering who isn't running it. It isn't Joe Biden.
Might be easier, yeah.
Yeah, that one I got that one covered. It ain't him.
Well, you know, Joe Biden, speaking about Ukraine, the whole conflict and all, made the statement that the butcher, Vladimir Putin, cannot remain in power.
Yeah.
Alluding to regime change to be orchestrated by the United States. Well, Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, promptly walked that back for him.
Talking about walking back, right.
So who's in charge of foreign policy, the president or the Secretary of State?
I'll say neither.
Who works for whom?
Yeah, I don't think either, really. I don't think Blinken's in charge of anything either.
No, nor do I. Nor do I. You know, so he's contradicting the president, who's supposed to have authority over this. You know, Joe Biden's up there calling for regime change. Now, if I'm the leader of a country, whether I'm a despot or not, and there's another country like the United States calling for regime change in my country, I'm not going to be real happy about that.
Yeah, I might get my radar aligned a little differently.
You know, not that I give two hoots about what Putin thinks.
That's right.
But that's just the way it is. If you start threatening other nations,
Right.
they're going to go into defensive mode.
Well, historically, they've been very careful about the language they use in these discussions.
Yes, they have.
Especially in a circumstance where, really, I mean, by all accounts, all of this could pretty quickly conflagrate into a bona fide World War III.
Well, it could.
You know.
It could. The Russians have nuclear arms,
Right.
both tactical and ballistic.
Right.
So, yeah, they could deploy those.
Yeah.
They could shoot down American planes, Polish planes. You know, they could target civilian airliners. You know, any number of things could precipitate this into a major
Right.
world war.
And, you know, a number of people have talked about it. Maybe that's worth it by some measure. I don't know. I personally don't think so, but we ought to certainly be discussing the consequences of these actions, and loose talk of regime change from the President of the United States, only to they obviously knew they had stepped in it because they turned around and walked it right back.
Yeah.
But the overarching point for this segment here, anyway, is that Joe Biden is not in command of these policies, and is really, I think, largely just being put out there with a hand. Look, we saw the cheat sheet, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, anybody who missed that, wow, that was revealing.
I should have grabbed that video.
Yeah.
That was really revealing.
Yeah, a big, tight little cheat sheet with the. First of all, I mean, without going into all the detail of describing it all, because they have limited time, but I mean, basically what it reveals is that questions are pre-screened, and the whole press conference is staged where he knows what questions he's going to get from who, and he knows what answers he's going to give. And I dare say those reporters know what answers they're going to get.
Yeah.
Okay. Very nauseating, especially in view of all the invective that was hurled at Trump. He was the most transparent, honest when it came to those questions. He got up there and just winged it. He said whatever. He'd answer questions. He'd talk, and they hated him for that as well.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Well, Biden went on to address the 82nd Airborne in Poland and actually told them that they would see things when they arrive in Ukraine.
Right.
Now, if I'm a soldier sitting there and the commander-in-chief is telling me you're going to see these things when you get there, then I'm thinking, well, we're going to be deployed.
Exactly. Natural
into
conclusion.
Another foreign nation's conflict.
And our history on these things, again, isn't that great.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, a complete 20-year sojourn in Afghanistan. That mission ended in complete, utter embarrassing failure here, just not even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're getting ready to get involved going toe-to-toe with Russia over Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. And of course, there's a lot of people that say this is all part of the type of things that we were talking about earlier with respect to the Great Reset. Create circumstances that are going to disrupt supply chains, food chains, create higher levels of inflation, monetary devaluation, making life miserable for citizens of especially the Western nations, to where they're receptive to these kind of Great Reset measures. So I think there's a part of that. But to answer the question, who's running the Biden administration? I read an article the other day. I didn't really realize this was going to be one of the topics. I would have made greater note of it. This fellow listed about 10 different entities he thought might be involved. And he said in no particular order, but of course there's the whole Obama crowd is one. He explicitly said that for some reason that he didn't think the Clintons were really part of that he didn't believe that they had much influence there. And there are a number of other entities, but his conclusion was that largely it's these same forces pushing for this Great Reset and for these world government, that they're really the ones running the country right now. How else would you explain overtly open borders? They're going to do away with Title 42.
Yeah.
They're going to relinquish on that. They're going to
let it sunset.
Sunset that next month. Title 42 is a provision that basically makes it so that people who are infected with COVID are not permitted to cross the border. Well, they shouldn't be letting anybody cross the border illegally. But they're claiming, and observers and experts say that you're going to see a surge on top of a surge when they renege on Title 42.
Yeah.
There's going to be so many of these people pouring over. They're estimating upwards of 50,000 people a day. Okay. That is so obviously on purpose. To me, that is right up there with destroying our energy independence. Those two things, energy independence and the open borders. I mean, these are, I think, treasonous actions that I think these people are betraying the autonomy and the sovereignty of the United States for this greater purpose.
I agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree.
Whether they believe the greater purpose serves the greater good or whether they're just lining their own pockets and want power, I don't know. I don't care.
Right.
They are doing those things, and nothing can convince me that these policies are good in any way, shape, or form for us or really anybody else in the world.
No, and in fact, the people who are orchestrating these things live above all that.
Right. They're not affected.
They are not the ones who are going to be directly affected by this. So they don't care. They don't care. And, you know, you were talking about these are the same people that are doing all these other things. Well, you know, what we've got, our foreign policy is like a crack house.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You can go in and you can paint the house green, but it's still the crack house. You can come back in the next administration and paint it yellow, but it's still the crack house. The same people are still inside doing the same thing, and that's what we have in Washington. You change the face of who's on the list of presidents. You put a few different senators and congressmen in, but the bottom line is the same people, the Klaus Schwab,
right.
the Mitch McConnells, those behind the scenes, they're all still running the thing. If you look at the Biden administration and you go back and you look at pictures of the Obama administration.
Well, they're carbon copies virtually.
They're carbon copies. Look at the picture of Obama in the war room the night they killed Osama bin Laden.
Right, right.
And it's basically a who's who of who is in the Biden administration.
That's
Anthony
right.
Blinken was there, and just.
Well, sometimes it's important to drill into just a couple of simple things. And I would say a real simple thing here, if you want to understand a little bit about all this, make note of all the pontificating and all the discussion about where Republicans and Democrats disagree. They never seem to disagree on foreign policy.
Right.
Okay. Foreign policy always seems to have lots of common threads. And if you don't, if you don't believe that, go read some history or spend 5 minutes watching everybody bluster and blunder about Ukraine. They're all singing from the same sheet of music.
Yes, they
are. All right. That's a telltale sign that there's a club. There's a memorandum of agreement, so to speak, amongst all these parties. Okay. And all the other stuff is window dressing for us. But that, I think, above all else, is the reason they hated Donald Trump. His foreign policy was not under their control. It may not have been the best foreign policy in every instance. I'm sure we could find some things to nitpick.
Sure.
But I certainly endorsed his aggressive posture towards China.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get involved in any more wars.
This is true.
He absolutely moved towards getting NATO to pay their fair share of the bill.
Mm-hmm.
And pointed out that their willingness to sign a deal and engage in natural gas delivery and oil from Russia while forcing us to carry the bill for protecting them against Russia, fundamentally unfair. All of those things, and boy, they screamed. The establishment was screaming like stuck pigs over that stuff.
Yes, they were, and the media was just adamant that Donald Trump had somehow offended all of our allies.
Right. Well, it's kind of
making them pay.
Well, it's kind of an offense not to get paid the bill.
Exactly.
It's like having a roommate. He never pays for anything you ask for. It's like, I'm offended. How dare you ask for your share of my share of the rent? And I know and I can't believe you're complaining about the fact that I ate the last of the sandwich ham in the fridge. That's exactly the attitude.
It absolutely is. Absolutely is. Well, we're in a phase right now. We have rampant inflation. Gas prices are high.
Yep.
Oil production, and I started to grab this chart, but it shows oil production. And as soon as Joe Biden took office, oil production dropped 10%.
Right.
Over 1 million barrels a day dropped almost overnight.
Which is the amount of the strategic reserve that he's releasing. So, and that's not good because we need that as a strategic reserve.
Well, it's idiotic.
It is.
And they want to enact, or they want to invoke the defense. What is it? The
Defense Authorization
Productivity something Act to push green energy products.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the level of production of the green energies, right? Since the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now in the 70s, 80s, and into the 90s, it was under 10%.
Right.
Right. Now, here we are 30 years later.
Probably still under 10%.
It's just slightly over 10%.
Oh, wow,
now.
okay.
And that's with all the government subsidies pushing this stuff.
Well, that's analogous to the war on poverty, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
same thing, we've been doing it for 30 years, haven't moved the needle at all.
Exactly. So, you know, if you think that this green energy is somehow by the year 2030 going to replace everything else,
Yeah, that's
we have,
nonsense.
it's not going to happen.
That's
It's
nonsense.
taken over 30 years for it to not even double.
Right.
Oil production.
And here's the thing, and please don't trot out this time. Well, the oil companies don't want to look. If they could produce viable energy alternatives, the free market would rocket those to the top of the list,
Exactly.
and that's what people would want. And look, they claim there's battery technology that's going to come to the fore that will change a lot of these sort of negative metrics associated with
Yeah.
electric. Well, when that happens, great. You're still not going to have the electric grid to support charging all these
Well, that's
cars.
right.
But things can move fast, but they do so in the free market.
In the free market. In fact, I read a research paper on a battery substrate that allows rapid charging, because the problem with rapid charging is you've got the heat of expansion.
Yeah, it destroys the battery.
Heat-induced expansion, and it
Distorts the battery, makes it,
yep,
yeah.
ultimately destroys the battery. Well, this is in experimental stages right now, but one day it may.
Look, they get
help
these
out.
cars to where they'll go 1,200 miles on a charge and it only takes 10 minutes to charge it. I'm there, you know, I'm there. Now, are they going to have to put giant nuclear reactors and substations in every neighborhood to
well,
because that
probably
the amount of energy to do all the things we do in this country comes from it has to come from somewhere.
Yeah. And it's not the wind or the sun.
It's not the wind or the sun.
sorry.
Those technologies are
not.
very, very far away from being viable.
Yep, it is. I wanted to get this in. We're out of time, but I did want to get this in since we were speaking of the Green New Deal and energy and what have you. It's good news. They're going to build a 1,300-mile pipeline.
Okay.
All right. There's also bad news, because the bad news is it's not to transport oil or energy-bearing materials.
Oh, no, yeah, is this the CO2 sequestration
This
thing?
is to pump CO2 to underground storage tanks to solve global warming.
Yeah. Well, that's part of that whole Cloward and Pittman thing. Just waste money.
It just wastes money.
Yeah.
And that's from Tom DeWeese. I got that from the American Policy Center, which is good information if you want to go look at
Absolutely.
Tom DeWeese and the American Policy Center. But going to pump it 1,300 miles to store it in underground storage tanks. Now, I don't know. I'm speechless on that.
Yeah, I'd love to see
words.
I'd love to see the math on that. First of all, I promise you that will amount to 1/10 billionth of a % of the total amount of CO2 that is produced by natural, sources.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just all so ridiculous. I mean, it's like the selling of indulgences, or
It is.
It's just things that have. It's like, okay, we're gonna mandate that you invent all your technology around the square wheel. Yeah, you could do it. What a waste of effort and productive activity.
Productive time,
Yeah.
exactly. And with that, we're out of time. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week for more America in Danger. Have a great week.